First class is for our premium travelers, sir. The words drip with condescension, slicing through the hum of the Chicago O'Hare terminal. Passengers within earshot glance up from their phones or boarding passes, some with mild curiosity, others with the sort of detached interest that expects nothing of them. Caleb Stratton does not flinch. His gaze remains steady, the set of his jaw unchanged, as if her tone were nothing more than static in the air. Yet somewhere beneath his composed exterior, the echo of a memory stirs his father's voice from decades ago, the evening before Caleb left for college. One day, you'll walk into a room knowing more than anyone there, and they'll still treat you like you don't belong. His father had spoken it without bitterness, simply as a truth Caleb would need to carry. That truth had proven itself countless times since. This morning's goal had been straightforward: fly to New York for a high-level investment meeting, review contracts en route, and return the next day. But the trip is already gathering the sort of texture he's come to recognize small abrasions to dignity, delivered with a smile or a smirk. Caleb stands before the boarding lane, leather briefcase in his left hand, boarding pass in his right, each as immaculate as the tailored navy suit across his frame. The morning had begun under the icy gray light of a Chicago winter. At the premium check-in counter, the attendant, a young man with neatly parted hair, had scanned Caleb's identification twice, his smile fixed yet hollow. "Flying with us today?" he'd asked, as if the boarding pass didn't already answer the question. Caleb had nodded, noting the absence of the usual welcome extended to platinum-tier travelers, the small details corporate training manuals call relationship building. TSA had been next. The line for elite travelers was short, but as Caleb approached the metal detector, a Transportation Security Administration officer stepped forward, palm raised. "Step over here for a random screening, sir." His voice carried the firmness of an order, not a request. Behind Caleb, two white businessmen in similar suits walked straight through unimpeded. The officer's gloved hands had rifled through Caleb's briefcase, lifting and setting down each item with studied care, yet without apology. Caleb had stood motionless, eyes steady, mind already storing the interaction away. The first-class lounge, perched above the bustling concourse, was no more welcoming. A hostess with a practiced smile intercepted him at the frosted glass entrance. "Membership card and boarding pass, please," she'd said, though they were already visible in his hand. Her gaze lingered on his photograph, then on his face, before sliding open the gate with a muted beep. "First time flying first class with us?" she asked, her tone making the question less an inquiry and more a presumption. Caleb had simply offered, "No," and walked past her into the low murmur of voices and clink of china. Now, at gate C-17, the final checkpoint stands between him and the quiet refuge of his seat. Lydia Markham wears the uniform of senior gate staff navy blazer with gold piping, a silk scarf knotted just so, and a vintage airline pin on her lapel that speaks to decades on the job. Her posture is upright, authoritative, a woman accustomed to being obeyed. She takes the boarding pass from his hand, holds it up to the scanner, and lets the machine beep once. Then again, then a third time, each pass slower than the last. Her eyes meet his with an expression that blends skepticism and superiority. "Are you certain this is your gate, sir?" Her voice carries easily over the ambient gate announcements, drawing glances from the queue. Caleb keeps his tone even. "Yes. Seat 1A. She studies the pass as though it might confess something under pressure. "These seats are quite expensive," she says, each syllable polished and deliberate. "Would you mind showing me your identification as well?" Behind him, the line shuffles forward. He hands her his driver's license without a word. Lydia inspects it longer than necessary, turning it under the light, glancing from the picture to his face as if to find a discrepancy invisible to the rest of the world. Passengers in line murmur softly, some avoiding eye contact, others openly watching. "Perhaps we should verify with my supervisor," Lydia says suddenly, raising her hand in a sweeping gesture toward the adjacent counter. "Michael, could you come over here a moment?" A tall man in a crisp uniform steps over, eyes darting between the boarding pass and Caleb. "Everything looks fine here," he says after a quick glance, his tone neutral. Lydia's lips tighten. "We've had some issues lately with boarding pass errors. Sometimes economy passengers receive incorrect assignments. We wouldn't want anyone to be embarrassed once they're on board." The implication is as clear as the fluorescent lighting above them. Caleb's fingers rest lightly on the handle of his briefcase. His eyes, calm but unyielding, shift from her face to the scanner. Michael hesitates, then gives a small nod toward the boarding lane. "Go ahead and board, sir." Lydia's mouth forms a thin line as she steps aside, scanning the pass with a reluctant flick of her wrist. Caleb walks forward, the short tunnel to the jet bridge stretching before him. As he passes the gate podium, Lydia leans slightly toward a younger attendant stationed nearby. Her words are hushed, but her eyes flick toward Caleb's back. The younger woman nods, gaze following him. The air in the jet bridge is warmer, tinged with the faint scent of jet fuel and stale carpeting. Caleb's footsteps are unhurried, his mind already cataloging the exchange. The triple scan, the public questioning, the invocation of price as a gatekeeping tool. He notes the way other first-class passengers had been waved through with little more than a glance at their passes. Ahead, the open aircraft door gleams under the cabin lights. A flight attendant in a crisp uniform stands ready to greet passengers. Caleb straightens his posture fractionally, his expression composed. There will be more moments like this, he knows. There always are. And each one will be recorded not in anger, but in the cold clarity of a man who understands the value of evidence. He steps across the threshold into the plane, the muted whoosh of the cabin door sealing behind him, carrying the faint echo of Lydia's last look, measured, appraising, and certain she had done nothing wrong. Her voice carries over the gate area as she waves for a supervisor. "Better make sure this one's legit." The moment Caleb steps into 1A, Tessa Collier is already watching him like he's in the wrong seat. Her eyes scan him the way a customs agent might inspect an unclaimed bag, polite enough for show, but heavy with unspoken judgment. She masks it quickly with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. The memory of another time stirs Boston, years back. He had been early for a high-stakes meeting, waiting in the hotel lobby with his briefcase at his feet. The concierge, mistaking his purpose, had approached with a gentle but insistent tone, telling him the waiting area was for guests only. Caleb had been the keynote speaker, booked into the top suite. He hadn't raised his voice then, just as he wouldn't now, but the reminder was sharp. Certain assumptions had a way of following him into every space. This chapter would not be about a single slight. It would be about accumulation, how subtle biases stacked until they became a wall. His focus now was on enduring the climb, without letting frustration spill into the open. The first-class cabin was immaculate, upholstered in muted tones of cream and gray, the polished walnut of the tray tables catching the morning light. Outside the windows, the tarmac gleamed wet from an earlier snow flurry, and the faint sound of jazz seeped from the overhead speakers. Tessa moved with the smooth efficiency of someone long used to this space, checking overhead bins, adjusting headrests. Her tone was cordial when she stopped at his seat, but the request landed with a thud. "I need to verify your boarding pass again, sir." Caleb glanced at the pass already tucked into the side pocket beside him. Without comment, he retrieved it, handing it over along with his platinum card. She studied them longer than necessary, flipping the pass back and forth, the platinum card between her fingers. Finally, she returned them with a clipped "thank you" and moved on. The service began. A tray of champagne flutes was offered to the couple across the aisle, each greeted by name. The same ritual played out down the row. Caleb waited, noting the sound of bubbles fizzing in crystal, the warmth in her tone to each passenger. When she reached him, she skipped entirely to the seat beyond his. Caleb let her pass, then waited until she began retreating to the galley before speaking. "Excuse me," he said, his voice even. "I believe you missed my seat for the pre-flight beverage." Tessa's pause was brief, but telling. "Economy passengers aren't entitled to pre-flight beverages," she said, her voice loud enough for the couple beside him to hear. The pause in conversation across the row was almost audible. Caleb kept his gaze steady. "I'm in first class, as you verified twice now." Her face didn't soften. "Of course, my mistake." Moments later, she returned with a champagne flute, placing it on his tray with a carelessness that sent the liquid quivering toward the rim. A man 2 seats away had been watching quietly. Medium build, neatly trimmed beard, dark suit with a subtle pinstripe, and a gold tie clip shaped like the scales of justice. His eyes lingered on the exchange, then dropped to his phone. Caleb could see the man's thumbs moving deliberately, as if taking notes. The meal service began an hour into the flight. Caleb watched the carts roll past, the scent of roasted chicken and rosemary drifting through the cabin. Trays landed before each passenger in turn, accompanied by a low exchange of pleasantries. When the cart reached him, it moved on without stopping. He waited a moment, then pressed the call button. Tessa arrived with a neutral expression. "My meal seems to be missing," Caleb said. Her explanation was immediate. "Your pre-ordered special meal isn't on our manifest. I can offer you something from economy if you're really hungry." The inflection in "really hungry" was unmistakable. He declined with a measured, "No, thank you." She shrugged lightly, as if the matter were closed, and walked away. In the galley, her voice lowered, but carried far enough for Caleb to catch pieces. The junior attendant, a younger woman with dark hair pulled into a bun, asked, "How do you think he got that seat?" Tessa's reply came with a quiet laugh. "Probably someone's assistant or a lucky upgrade. Did you see his watch? Bet it's a knockoff." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, but his eyes stayed on the pages of the contract he had opened on his tablet. The man with the gold tie clip leaned toward him just slightly as he adjusted his seat. "Name's Elias Moreno," he said under his breath. "I'm an attorney, civil rights. I'm documenting what's been going on here." He slid a card across the armrest gap between them. Caleb glanced at it briefly, then returned his own in a quiet exchange. Elias's eyebrows rose a fraction when he read the embossed letters. Stratton Equity Partners. He didn't say more, but Caleb saw the realization flicker in his eyes. Midway through the flight, a commotion began near the forward galley. An elderly white woman clutching a handbag made her way down the aisle with Tessa guiding her. "I believe you're in my seat," the woman said to Caleb, offering a boarding pass. Tessa was quick to step in. "Sir, there's been a mix-up. Would you mind moving to economy where we have some space? We need to accommodate this passenger." Caleb reached for his boarding pass and card once again, holding them so both women and the surrounding passengers could see. "This is my assigned seat," he said evenly. "Perhaps the other passenger should check her flight details." The elderly woman peered down at the slip of paper, then flushed. "Oh my, this is flight 2377. I'm supposed to be on 37. I'm on the wrong plane entirely." The color drained from Tessa's face. Without another word, she ushered the woman away toward the front. Elias's eyes followed them, then returned to Caleb. There was no smile, only a slow shake of the head, a silent recognition of what had just happened. As the cabin settled, Caleb reached down, unlatched his briefcase, and slid his hand inside. His fingers closed around the smooth, cool surface of a device most passengers would never see. He rose without hurry, excusing himself past Elias, and walked forward to the lavatory. The door closed with a soft click behind him, sealing away the noise of the cabin. He stood before the mirror, meeting his own reflection. There was no anger in his features, no visible trace of the last 2 hours, only the measured focus of a man ready to change the terms of the game entirely. From his briefcase, he withdrew a slim, matte black satellite phone and set it on the counter beside the sink. With one practiced motion, he powered it on, the tiny screen glowing to life as the encryption protocols began to cycle. The cabin lights outside dimmed slightly as the plane adjusted altitude. Inside the lavatory, the light above the mirror illuminated Caleb's face in even relief. He waited for the signal indicator to stabilize, then picked up the phone, pressing a single number on the keypad. "Victor," he said when the call connected. "It's time." He listened for the answer, eyes still fixed on the man in the glass. "Victor, it's time. Execute the package, effective immediately." Caleb's voice is low, but the words carry the weight of an empire. On the other end, there is no hesitation, only the sound of a chair sliding back and the muffled rustle of people turning toward a new center of gravity. "Understood," Victor Hahn replies, steady as tide. "Authorization level 1?" "Authorization level 1, Caleb confirms. His reflection in the lavatory mirror looks back without triumph, without heat. A practiced calm settles over him, the same composure he has worn in boardrooms where billions hinge on a nod. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a memory from the gate flickers the morning show on the television above the concourse newsstand, red tickers crawling past a smiling anchor, the market's pulse measured in restless numbers. Timing is a language he speaks fluently. Today, he intends to speak it aloud. He ends the call, sets the satellite phone on the polished counter, and waits for the next encrypted ping. The lavatory's soft fan hums. Beyond the door, the cabin carries on with its choreography. A cart gliding hushed conversation, the intermittent clink of glass. He rinses his hands, runs a fingertip along the edge of the mirror to wipe a stray droplet, and listens. The ping arrives as a subtle vibration against his palm. Victor again. "Legal is on," comes the report. "Acquisitions desk is live. I am opening the shell array and routing through our international custodians. We will begin with quiet accumulation on low-volume venues, then accelerate through coordinated blocks. I will have the first tranche in the system within 10 minutes. "Begin the audit," Caleb says. "I want data on their frontline decision trees. Retrieve 5 years of discrimination complaints, resolved and unresolved. I want training decks, email chains, any language that substitutes atmosphere for gatekeeping. Secure copies before their legal team thinks to lock the cabinets." "Already assigning investigators," Victor replies. His voice drops even lower. "One more item. Communications is drafting a neutral statement of intent. Do we hold until position threshold?" "Hold," Caleb says. "No public posture until we are past the point where they can bluster us off the field. I will review the language in flight." He ends the call again, slips the phone back into the inner pocket of his jacket, and feels the familiar weight settle against his chest. The mirror yields his image a final time, eyes clear, shoulders squared. He opens the door and steps into the aisle. A flight attendant glances up as he passes, a quick professional smile clicking into place. Caleb returns a polite nod and moves to his seat. Elias Moreno, The man with the gold tie clip looks over with an expression that is neither prying nor performative, just present, the way a witness is present. Caleb places his briefcase by his feet, retrieves his tablet, and signs into a secure document room with a sequence of numbers that only muscle memory recalls. It begins. On a 20th floor trading floor in the West Loop, Victor's voice cuts across the soft roar of keyboards and white noise machines. Package 7, confirm. Terminals flicker awake in unison. A row of quants in headphones straighten, lines of code compiling like a sudden rain. In a glassed-in conference room, 3 attorneys swivel toward a paralegal jogging in with a stack of binders. "You are on records," one counsel says. "I want employment rosters by department, with tenure breakdowns, and I want every complaint that was marked as resolved by coaching rather than disciplinary action." A senior trader taps a key and watches an order ladder populate across 4 screens. "Executing microslices at 3 venues," she says, as much to herself as to anyone. Dark pool entry queued, spreads tight, volatility rising on the open. The floor's overseer, an operations veteran with the stance of a dock foreman, checks a wall of clocks, then the thin line of a heartbeat on an index monitor. "Do not make the first move obvious," he warns. "We want gravity on our side. Startle them later." Downtown, the headquarters of North Star Airlines floats above the Chicago River, all glass and brushed steel and the museum hush of corporate money. The lobby's centerpiece is a sepia photograph, a line of men in narrow ties and the same square-shouldered confidence, the company's first executive team in the early 1960s. A docent's plaque describes them as pioneers of American air travel. No one mentions the pilots and attendants who never made it into photographs, or the passengers whose names were misspelled into invisibility. Upstairs, the present-day executives are assembling without knowing their day has already been rewritten. In the corner office, Margaret Halford stands before the window for one last breath of stillness. The river below is a sheet of clouded glass. She has a calendar blocked into 15-minute units and a flight to Houston at 6 o'clock that she will not make. Her assistant appears in the doorway with an expression that says, "Today is going to be one of those days." "You have the operations stand up in 5, the assistant says, "and legal wants to brief you on a Department of Transportation inquiry about complaint backlogs." "Put legal at 9:30, Margaret replies, picking up a pen she keeps for balance rather than ink. "Let operations go first." The operations team is already gathered, a half moon around the main screen. Numbers cascade, routes, fuel hedges, customer satisfaction composites that make everyone feel better because they are averages, and averages do not look you in the eye. "We have an anomaly," a risk analyst says, leaning forward. "Unusual activity in our equity. It is not volume, it is pattern." "What kind of pattern?" asks the chief financial officer, who prides himself on preventing surprises. His tie is knotted a little too tightly. His face is the color of porcelain that has been scrubbed too often. "Coordinated blocks," the analyst says. "We are seeing purchase orders distributed across multiple accounts with common signatures. The bid steps exactly 1 tick ahead of our automated defenses. It looks like someone is mapping our protection and stepping around it." The chief financial officer squints, as if he can force the lines to make a different shape. "Is this retail behavior? An algorithm herd?" The head of market surveillance taps the screen. "No herd. This is choreography." Margaret sets down her pen. "Who is buying?" "We cannot say yet," the analyst says. "The orders are masked through custodial banks, but the rhythm is familiar." He glances at the head of security. "You should watch the names that have bought pieces of 2 other carriers in the last 5 years." The head of security, a former federal investigator with a memory like a filing cabinet, lifts one eyebrow. "Stratton Equity Partners," he says. No one laughs. The chief financial officer does not smile. They would not come for us without talks, he says, half to himself. They do not do ambush. Unless, the analyst says carefully, we gave them a reason. In the next room, phones are ringing. A vice president of investor relations answers and begins the mantra that buys time. We are not aware of any material changes to fundamentals. We are monitoring market conditions. Company guidance remains unchanged. The callers, institutional funds, are not soothed. Guidance, unchanged, is not a compass in wind. Back on the plane, the cabin is lulled into that peculiar mid-flight quiet, the sound of air pressing itself along aluminum, a lullaby composed by engineers. Caleb reviews a draft of the acquisition plan, finger-scrolling, making small annotations where instinct suggests a smoother flank or a faster hinge. He toggles to a second document. A preliminary demand for production of records, addressed to North Star's general counsel, elevating the urgency of a different kind of accounting. A message banner pops onto the top of his screen. Position building on schedule. 57 discrete accounts active. Velocity increasing. He acknowledges with a tap. Tessa floats past in the aisle, her smile now practiced to a glossy finish. She asks a passenger 2 rows back if the lamb was to his taste, then checks the cabin temperature with a fingertip to the wall control. When her gaze drops to Caleb's tablet, there is a flicker she cannot decode: graphs, term sheets, a particular kind of legalese that does not belong to ordinary travelers. The flicker passes. Assumptions relieve her from connecting the dots. Elias watches the subtle theater, the way attitudes rearrange themselves around rumors the staff cannot yet name. He leans toward Caleb just enough to speak without being heard beyond the 2 of them. "Whatever you are doing," he says quietly, "it has more moving parts than anything I have seen at 30,000 feet. He allows himself a small breath of gallows humor. "I hope you will let me know if I should buckle in extra tight." Caleb's mouth tilts at one corner, a substitute for a smile. "There will be some crosswinds," he says. "You already fastened your belt." He taps the edge of Elias's gold tie clip with one fingertip, acknowledging not just a piece of metal but a roll. He returns to the document. Another banner arrives, this time tagged legal. Draft language for independent audit mandate. It reads, reporting line, board only, scope, training content, complaint triage, disciplinary consistency by race and tenure. He makes 3 edits. Add authority for unannounced shadowing at gates. Require anonymous passenger reporting with a guaranteed response window. And include a reopening mechanism for any complaint previously closed with the word coaching. In the North Star boardroom, a portfolio manager appears on the central monitor, cheeks bright with the heat of someone who has sprinted to a camera. "We are hearing chatter," she says without preamble. "Blocks are going off. Who is buying? We want assurance this is not a hostel. Our clients want to know if you will preserve the dividend." "You will receive a statement as soon as we have one," the chief financial officer says, voice through teeth. "There is no change to fundamental—" "Save it," the manager says. "I know what you say when you have nothing to say." The screen goes black. The silence that follows feels like a room waiting to find out if it is on fire. Margaret turns to legal. "If this is Stratton, do we have a play?" she asks. The general counsel is a careful woman who chooses her adjectives as if they were witnesses. "If it is Stratton, they will not be playing," she says. "They will be executing. They do diligence like a forensic lab. If they have a theory about us, they will come with evidence, not slogans." "We can still make them negotiate," the chief financial officer insists, as if saying it can make a line bend. "We can open a back channel." "They do not open channels," the general counsel says. "They open doors that we thought were locked. If you are asking whether I can call someone there, I can, but you will not like the terms." The head of security walks back in, a tablet under his arm. We have confirmation, he says. The accounts are cross-referring to a custodian network Stratton has used twice before. The sequence is theirs. And one more thing. He hesitates, calculating whether to ask forgiveness later. I received an internal query from operations. Apparently a pilot sent a note from the cockpit about a strange announcement. The message requested identification of any executives or major shareholders on board, particularly from Stratton Equity Partners. The room freezes in that strange corporate way, bodies still, only eyes moving. Is someone from Stratton on one of our flights? Margaret asks, the words brittle. We do not know, the head of security says. The manifest tags VIP occupations when known. I checked the long-haul first-class list. Nothing obvious. There is a privacy setting some frequent flyers use to mask affiliations. If the person is using it, we would not see it unless a crew member recognizes a face. Find out, Margaret says. Right now. Phones buzz like insects after rain. On the trading floor, Victor stands with his hands behind his back, watching a thin green line behave like a blade. Tranche 2, he says. Speed up the lateral flow. I want to be past 30 by noon, but tilt the curve so we do not hit their circuit breakers. He turns to the legal team, who have moved their war room into an empty office and are surrounded by sticky notes like a hive. If they lock the vault, will we have copies? We are harvesting as we speak, says the senior associate. Public filings, archived training decks, memo threads flagged by specific language. We have already found a manager email that uses the term maintain premium atmosphere in a way that reads like code. Good, Victor says. Keep reading until the code translates itself, and if you find any complaint closed by coaching, mark it in red. He steps away to take a call from communications. We have your draft, the director says. If asked, we will say that we are long-term investors focused on operational excellence and customer experience. Do not say experience, Victor replies. Say dignity. Do not overuse the word. Say it once in a place where they cannot miss it. Back at 30,000 feet, the plane swims through sunlight like a trout through a bright current. Caleb signs a set of digital initials that function as levers in a machine whose shape only he and a few others understand. He pauses to glance out the window, the quilt of the Midwest arranged below in winter whites and gray blues. When he looks back, another message appears. Position above 25. Defensive chatter detected. We anticipate a call from their chief executive officer to our main line. Caleb imagines the room. The glass, the photograph in sepia, the heads bending toward the same small beacon. He thinks of the morning's television talking about market optimism like the weather, and of how quickly fair weather changes when someone kicks up wind. He senses Elias looking at him. There is a way, Caleb says, still reading. That people like to say that change happens slowly, incrementally, after a committee and a consultant and a ribbon. That is one way. Today is another. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The captain's voice rises from the speakers, smooth and even. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you are comfortable as we make our way eastbound. We are at a cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. We will have you on the ground on schedule. Flight attendants, please check in at the galley. A tiny catch in the cadence betrays the message that came into the cockpit a minute earlier from company headquarters. Priority request to identify any representative of Stratton Equity Partners aboard. The captain, not a fool, keeps his tone friendly and the information where it belongs between professionals, not in the aisle. In the North Star headquarters, a new face appears in the boardroom doorway, flushed with the heat of an elevator sprint. We have more, she says, breath short. A second wave of purchases just fired right as our standard counter moved. They anticipated the shield. They stepped to the right. I have never seen someone time it like this. Call him, the chief financial officer says, not entirely sure who him is. A number appears on a screen, the general number for Stratton Equity Partners. It rings, is answered by a voice that could belong to a concierge at a quiet hotel, and adds nothing to the sum of their knowledge. "Tell them we are open to a conversation," Margaret instructs, eyes now on the framed photograph. She does not need the docent's plaque to recite the names. She knows what lineage the company imagines for itself, and what it has refused to imagine. "I want a direct line," she says. "I do not want to read about our future in a push alert." The head of security's tablet chimes. He looks down and then up, the way someone does when a line connects. "We just received an internal crew note," he says. "The staff on Flight 14 sent a report that a first-class passenger presented a card that caused a reaction. I do not have the name yet." "Find the name," Margaret says again, but it sounds thinner, as if some of the room's oxygen has drifted out of a seam. Victor lifts his eyes to the wall of clocks and considers, not for the first time, the craft of arranging the inevitable like a table setting. He issues a quiet command. "Insert the keystone." On the screens, numbers realign in an instant. The position ticks to the edge of consequence. A junior trader half whispers, half prays, "We are there." The head of market surveillance at North Star says, too loud, "We are there," but he means it differently. "They just crossed a line where they can demand board access. They are not asking." It is the head of security who gives the piece no one wants. "I have a name," he says. He does not dramatize it. He simply places the simple fact on the table. Caleb Stratton. For a breath, the room does not move. Then the chief financial officer says, "Impossible," and immediately knows that word doesn't belong in risk management. "Is he on a flight?" he asks, already knowing what the answer will be. "We are verifying," the head of security says, but his tone has changed. The lines of his face have taken on that particular set that signals a problem is now a fact. On the aircraft, a different kind of confirmation arrives, a message ribbon that needs only 3 characters to communicate a threshold. Elias sees Caleb's eyes change by a single degree. The way a horizon looks different when you know you are crossing from lake into sea. Down the aisle, Tessa distributes warm cookies to the couple across from them, her voice dipped in honey. She turns toward Caleb as if to offer the same, then pauses, as if a second thought caught her sleeve. She sets a plate on his tray table with the same meticulous care as before, her smile a fraction wider than necessity. He does not pick up the cookie. He taps his screen instead, acknowledges the position update, and opens the letter he will sign with a digital pen. It is addressed to North Star's board. It begins with 4 words that are both promise and verdict. "We intend to help." He reads it twice, removes a single adverb, and signs. The North Star boardroom is now a hive, the soft courtesy of executives burned off like early fog. The general counsel is issuing instructions in a voice that still manages to be precise. "Prepare to receive a formal notice," she says. If they already framed this as systemic reform, rather than mere financial engineering, our public posture cannot be no comment. We need to look like adults. "Can we kill it?" someone asks, which in this room means a defensive maneuver involving law and bankers and a squeal of patriotism. The general counsel does not even turn her head. "Not with that share number," she says, "and not if they have what I suspect they have." "What do you suspect?" Margaret asks. "A pattern," the counsel says. "One that will look less like a few ugly anecdotes and more like a design. If their letter lands the way Stratton letters usually do, it will carry words like dignity and oversight and independent authority, and it will come with exhibits." For a moment, no one speaks. Even the climate system seems to pull its breath. Then the chief financial officer looks at Margaret and says, with a sincerity that comes late, we should call him. It is not a strategy. It is a reflex dressed as reason. In his seat, Caleb closes the board letter and opens a different file, a draft mandate for an independent auditor with the power to shadow boarding gates unannounced and to reopen closed complaints without management consent. He reads the last clause again, the one that makes the auditor report to the board, not to an executive whose bonus depends on clean numbers. He thinks of the photograph in the lobby, of airplanes lifting over a nation learning to be many kinds of people at once, and of how often the learning had been postponed at the gate. A flight attendant steps into the aisle with the guarded urgency of someone carrying news that must be whispered. She stops 2 rows ahead and leans toward the gentleman there, then glances back at Caleb, measuring something she does not have a name for yet. Back at headquarters, the head of security holds his tablet so the room can see. "Confirmed," he says. "He is aboard Flight 14, first class." The chief financial officer swears under his breath. Margaret places both palms flat on the table, the posture of someone bracing against motion. Their head of communications slips into the room, already drafting phrases in air. "We can say we welcome engaged shareholders," he begins. But he stops when he sees the look on the general counsel's face. In the quiet of the cabin, sunlight shoulders through a gap in the window shade and draws a pale bar across Caleb's jacket sleeve. He closes the legal draft and, for the first time since he returned from the lavatory, lets his thumb rest against the bezel of the tablet, a pause that is not indecision, but recognition. The next phase will be louder. People who ignored what they saw will look. People who saw and looked away will be asked to speak. He has planned for the noise the way an architect plans for wind by building for it before anyone notices. A chime sounds as a cart backs into the galley. Someone laughs softly 3 rows back, the comfortable sound of travelers who expect their day to remain ordinary. Elias watches Caleb, and then, almost imperceptibly, nods. The nod is not a toast. It is a witness mark, the kind a craftsman incisors into wood to say, "I was here for the moment the joint set." Back on the plane, Caleb closes his tablet and signals the flight attendant for water, knowing the real turbulence is yet to come. The announcement comes over the intercom with a calmness that feels just slightly too deliberate. "If there is a representative from Stratton Equity Partners aboard, please identify yourself to the cabin crew for an urgent corporate message." The words hang in the air like a sudden drop in altitude. Conversations pause. A few heads turn. Tessa Collier stiffens where she's standing near the galley, her fingers tightening on the handle of a service cart. She forces a composed expression and begins making her way down the aisle, stopping at each row, asking in a light, almost casual tone, "Are you with Stratton Equity Partners by any chance?" The silver-haired man in 2C shakes his head. The woman behind him frowns, confused. Midway through the cabin, she reaches Caleb Stratton's seat. She looks at him as if the answer is obvious. "You wouldn't happen to be from Stratton Equity Partners, would you?" There's a faint disbelief in her voice, like someone asking a stranger if they own the building they're standing in. Caleb reaches into his jacket, retrieves a single business card, and holds it between 2 fingers. She takes it automatically. Her eyes drop to the embossed silver letters. Caleb Stratton, Chief Executive Officer, Stratton Equity Partners. The recognition floods her face all at once. Color drains from her cheeks, and for a moment she seems to forget where she is. I need to inform the captain," she stammers, nearly tripping as she turns back toward the galley. Caleb watches her go, the card still clutched in her hand like a burning coal. In the cockpit, the captain listens as she blurts out the details. "You did what?" he says, his voice pitched low but edged. The first officer glances over, incredulous. "Are you saying we've been Mistreating the CEO of the company that's buying us out? The captain closes his eyes briefly, absorbing the scale of the misstep. Ask him if he'll speak with corporate after we land, and for God's sake, stop making it worse. Back in first class, service shifts abruptly. Tessa reappears beside Caleb's seat, posture now deferential, voice warm in a way it hadn't been all morning. Mr. Stratton, can I refresh your drink before landing? Perhaps some warm cookies? Is there anything at all I can do to make your flight more comfortable? Caleb's gaze is calm, unreadable. No, thank you, he says simply. She nods quickly and retreats, the forced brightness in her expression flickering. Down on the ground in Chicago, the headquarters of North Star Airlines is in full crisis mode. In the executive conference room, Margaret Halford has just been handed confirmation from the head of security. Caleb Stratton is aboard one of their flights, in first class. The board is already on a secure call, voices overlapping with questions and demands. Get him on the phone immediately, Margaret orders. If he's willing to talk, we need to… But she's cut off by the head of legal, who warns that any direct contact now could be construed as negotiating under duress. Our best chance is in person, at the gate, he says. Show deference, make it clear we're prepared to listen. Margaret nods, already imagining the optics. Then we'll meet him there. She signals for her assistant. Assemble the senior team. We're going to the airport. On the tarmac at Caleb's destination, the unusual preparations are underway. Airport operations has cleared a section of the arrival gate for a VIP reception. Security officers and airline representatives stand ready, their posture formal, their eyes scanning the jet bridge. Inside the plane, the descent begins. The captain's voice comes over the speakers again, this time with an unusual request. We ask that all passengers except those in row 1 remain seated after we've reached the gate. Murmurs ripple through the cabin. Regular travelers, frequent flyers, they all know this isn't normal. Caleb powers down his tablet, placing it neatly into his briefcase. He adjusts his cufflinks, checks the drape of his jacket. Across the aisle, Elias Moreno watches with quiet interest. He can read the shift in the air, the way attention has begun to orbit around Caleb without anyone quite saying why. The wheels touch down with a firm thud, the engine spooling down as the aircraft rolls to the gate. Through the small oval window, Caleb can see them, a cluster of executives waiting just beyond the glass, their tailored coats pulled tight against the wind. Even at this distance, their unease is visible in the way they stand. Too still, as if bracing for something they can't control. The seatbelt sign dings off. Tessa is at his side almost immediately. Mr. Stratton, she begins, her voice pitched low. Our CEO and executive team are waiting to speak with you personally at the gate. They've sent a team to escort you. Caleb meets her eyes with the same composed look he's worn all flight. How interesting, he replies. He neither commits nor refuses. The words hang in the air between them, neutral but edged with the knowledge of all that has led to this moment. The forward door opens with a hiss, and instead of the usual ground crew member, Margaret Halford steps onto the plane, flanked by 2 senior executives. She offers her hand. Mr. Stratton, I'm Margaret Halford. Grit. There seems to be a situation we need to discuss urgently. Caleb rises, his height and presence filling the narrow aisle. Indeed, he says, his voice carrying to the nearby rows. Though I'm curious why it took a controlling stake in your company to receive the respect any first-class passenger deserves. A ripple moves through the crew, and passengers alike, soft gasps, shifting postures. Margaret's smile falters for just a moment before she recovers. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, she offers. Privacy wasn't afforded to me when your staff questioned my right to be in this cabin, Caleb answers, his tone still even. But yes, we have much to discuss. He steps into the jet bridge, the executives falling into step around him as they move toward the waiting delegation. At the far end, Lydia Markham stands rooted to the spot, her face pale as recognition dawns. A chime from her phone. Please report to administrative offices immediately regarding an urgent personnel matter. She looks up in time to see Caleb glance her way, a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes, before he turns back to Margaret. I experienced discrimination from the moment I entered your airport until we landed, Caleb says evenly. Not as a CEO, but as a black man holding a first-class ticket. The executive team exchanges uneasy glances. They understand now that this is not about a single incident. This is about the kind of change that arrives like a storm and leaves nothing untouched. The conference room at North Star Airlines headquarters is a gleaming oval of glass and chrome, the kind of space designed to make people feel small in the face of corporate power. But this morning, that dynamic is reversed. Caleb Stratton sits at the head of the table, his presence calm but immovable, flanked on either side by members of his legal and executive team. Behind him, the Chicago skyline stretches in sharp winter light, every pane of glass reflecting the cold clarity of the moment. The air carries an almost tangible tension. On the wall-mounted screens, security footage plays in crisp detail. Lydia Markham at the boarding gate, her tone clipped as she scans his pass multiple times. Tessa Collier in the cabin, bypassing his seat with the champagne tray. The elderly passenger incident, captured from the two angles. The audio cuts cleanly through the silence. Economy passengers aren't entitled to pre-flight beverages. The sentence hangs in the air like smoke. Margaret Halford sits 3 seats down, her posture tight, her hands folded neatly on the table. She looks older than she did on the jet bridge, as if the intervening hours have added years. Around her, North Star's board members avert their eyes, their tablets held like shields. This, Caleb begins, gesturing toward the paused frame of Tessa in mid-sentence, is not an isolated event. It's systemic. His voice is measured, almost quiet, but the weight behind it draws every gaze. With a tap on the tablet before him, he changes the slide to a chart. Data points and percentages showing that black first-class passengers are stopped for additional credential checks at a rate 8 times higher than white passengers. Another tap brings up internal communications emails using coded phrases like maintain premium atmosphere and apply discretion on passenger verification. The silence deepens. This is your culture, Caleb continues. It's embedded in your training, reinforced by your management, and ignored when complaints are raised. 73 formal reports in the last year alone, all dismissed without corrective action. Margaret leans forward, her voice low but carefully pitched. Mr. Stratton, while these incidents are concerning, perhaps we can resolve this matter privately. Name your price, and… Caleb cuts in, his tone unshaken. This isn't about money. He holds her gaze. It's about accountability and transformation. If you think this can be bought away quietly, you've misunderstood both my intentions and my position here. One by one, he lays out his terms. Immediate termination of those directly involved in discriminatory practices. A complete overhaul of training with an emphasis on eliminating racial bias. The appointment of an independent civil rights auditor with direct board access. A $50 million investment in diversity initiatives and scholarships. And meaningful diversification of the executive team. Around the table, some of the board members shift, ready to protest, but Caleb doesn't raise his voice. Before you object, remember this. I now represent the majority of your shareholders. This is not a negotiation. It's a notification. On another floor of the building, Lydia Markham sits in a stark HR conference room. Her arms are folded, her expression still defiant. "I was just doing my job," she says to the HR director. "Following protocol." Across from her, Tessa Collier sits straighter, her hands clasped, the edge of remorse in her eyes. The HR director exchanges a look with the company's legal counsel. "What protocol exactly?" "You know," Lydia says with a tight shrug. "Passengers who don't fit the usual profile. People who might have been upgraded by mistake." Or she stops abruptly as the door opens. Caleb steps inside, silent, until Lydia looks up and recognizes him. "Or people who look like me?" he asks. His voice is calm, but the question lands with precision. Lydia's face drains of color. Tessa exhales slowly, then speaks into the stillness. "Yes," she admits. "Minority passengers get extra scrutiny. It's understood. Even if it's never written down, it's wrong, and I participated in it." Lydia's head snaps toward her, eyes wide. "You can't." "I can," Tessa says, her voice firmer now. "Because it's the truth." The HR director leans back, folding his hands. "That's all we need to hear." In the boardroom above, the vote is swift. Caleb's conditions are accepted unanimously. Margaret's resignation is processed within the hour, her role to be filled by an interim CEO from Stratton Equity Partners until a permanent appointment is made. By the time Caleb leaves the building, financial news outlets are already running the headline, "North Star Airlines under new leadership following surprise takeover." Analysts speculate on the speed and precision of the move, with some connecting it to the discrimination incident that has begun to circulate online. Outside the revolving glass doors, a winter wind slices through the plaza. Caleb pauses on the steps, looking out at the city. This is only the beginning. The structural changes will take months, maybe years, but the foundation has shifted. And once a foundation shifts, the building can never be the same again. The first snow of January dusts the runways at O'Hare, turning the airport into a muted expanse of white and steel. From a private lounge overlooking the taxiways, Caleb Stratton watches a North Star jet lift off, its engines cutting through the cold morning air. Beside him, a small team of policy advisors and legal counsel shuffle papers, their voices low. Today is not about confrontation. It is about cementing what was won in the boardroom into something that cannot be undone. The events of the past week have moved quickly. Public opinion, already sensitive to stories of corporate bias, seized on the viral footage of the Gate incident. National news networks replayed the clip with scrolling captions about first-class discrimination and systemic airline bias. Letters from advocacy groups landed in Caleb's inbox, many of them from people in their 60s and 70s who remembered similar indignities from decades past. They wanted change. But more than that, they wanted permanence. Caleb remembers one letter in particular, a retired school principal from Birmingham, who wrote about being forced to sit in the back of a flight in the late 1960s, despite holding a first-class ticket. Her words had been steady, but the grief in them was unmistakable. It's not about the seat. It's about the signal they send when they decide where we belong. He intends to erase that signal from North Star's culture. The conference room on the executive floor is warmer than the boardroom that saw Margaret Halford's resignation. Sunlight pours in through the tall windows, glinting off the lake in the distance. Seated around the table are the newly appointed interim CEO, the incoming head of training and development, and Dr. Simone Everett, a civil rights auditor with a reputation for dismantling institutional bias. Dr. Everett, in her 60s, with silver-threaded hair pulled back in a low bun, wastes no time. "Your training manual is an encyclopedia of polite discrimination," she says, her tone clipped but precise. Subtle language, suggestive guidelines, vague instructions about maintaining a certain image, These give cover to biased enforcement. We will strip it down to plain, measurable standards. No interpretation, no loopholes. The interim CEO nods, taking notes. Caleb listens, occasionally adding context from the shareholder's perspective. He insists on quarterly public reports and independent audits, not just internal memos. Every element is designed so that the next executive team cannot simply slide back into old habits. Midway through the meeting, a call comes in from Tessa Collier. She has accepted a role as part of the new training development group, working directly with Dr. Everett. Her voice over speakerphone is steady, but carries a trace of unease. "I need to tell you," she says, "there's resistance among some senior crew. They're calling this overcorrection, saying passengers are too sensitive." Dr. Everett leans forward. "Good," she says. "It's a sign we're touching the nerve that needs touching." Later that afternoon, Caleb walks the concourse in Terminal 3 without announcing his presence. The terminal still hums with its usual noise boarding calls, rolling suitcases, the hiss of espresso machines. But he sees changes already. Gate agents greeting every passenger without the subtle up and down scan, flight attendants making announcements that are sharper, more inclusive. Near Gate 22, he overhears a conversation between two older travelers in wool coats. They're discussing the viral video, unaware of who stands behind them. "It's about time someone stood up to them," one says. "My brother stopped flying this airline years ago because of how they treated him." Caleb smiles faintly and moves on. The day ends with a press conference. The podium is set against a backdrop of North Star's new slogan, short, declarative, impossible to mistake. Every passenger, every flight. Caleb speaks briefly, his words chosen to be both a promise and a warning. Dignity isn't an upgrade, it's standard. Cameras flash, reporters scribble, and somewhere in the crowd, a few of the older faces nod in quiet agreement. As the conference disperses, Dr. Everett joins him at the podium. Her voice is low enough for only him to hear. "We've started a fire here, Caleb. The question is, are you ready for who tries to put it out?" There are moments in life when the insult is so sharp, so public, that it feels like the ground has been pulled from under you. That was how it began for Caleb Stratton, standing at the gate, first-class ticket in hand, being told through tone, through posture, through policy-thin excuses that he did not belong where he had rightfully placed himself. For those who have lived long enough to see injustice wear many disguises, the scene was all too familiar. Sometimes the prejudice is loud and obvious. More often, it is cloaked in procedure, dressed in corporate politeness, and delivered with a smile meant to make the victim question their own perception. Yet Caleb did not answer humiliation with shouting. He did not reach for the kind of vengeance that burns hot and fades quickly. Instead, he took a breath and began the long, deliberate work of turning the tables. It was the work of quiet strength, strength that measures its steps, that studies the ground before moving, that knows the fight is not only against the person in front of you, but the system behind them. He was not alone. Along the way, there were those who saw what happened and refused to look away. Some were strangers in the terminal that day, their expressions carrying the weight of unspoken agreement. I have seen this before. Some were inside the company, bound by rules they did not write, until Caleb's stand gave them permission to speak. And then there were the ones, like Tessa Collier, who risked their own position to stand alongside him, proving that allyship is not about comfort, it is about courage. The turning point was not just the boardroom takeover, though it made headlines. The deeper victory was in stripping away the hollow language of policy that had allowed bias to flourish. It was in refusing the easy settlement and insisting on structural reform, public audits, independent oversight, measurable standards. These were not symbolic gestures. They were guardrails against the quiet slide back into old habits. For older Americans watching this unfold, the parallels to earlier struggles were impossible to ignore. The decades have changed the clothing, the language, and the settings, but not the underlying fight. Caleb's story reminded them that dignity is never a one-time achievement. It must be guarded, renewed, and defended in every generation. The antagonists in this story, whether through conscious malice or the casual cruelty of unexamined bias, served as a reminder that prejudice is persistent. But so is resistance. And when resistance is rooted in strategy rather than impulse, it can dismantle not just an insult, but the scaffolding that made the insult possible. Justice, in this case, was not a headline. It was a culture rebuilt. It was the sight of gate agents greeting every passenger without that fractional pause of judgment. It was hearing older travelers, once resigned to avoidance, speak about returning to fly with a company they now trusted. It was knowing that an industry watched and learned, pressured by what became known as the Stratton standards. And for Caleb, justice was also personal. It was walking through the concourse as any other traveler, anonymous except to himself, and feeling no weight in the air except the weight of his own carry-on. It was the knowledge that the space he occupied now was truly his, not because of money or influence, but because no one had the power to decide otherwise. The lesson is clear. Policy without respect is paper thin. Real change begins when human dignity becomes the standard, not the exception. And it takes immense courage to confront not just the individual who wronged you, but the machinery that enabled them. It takes vision to fight for a future in which no one else will have to fight the same battle. In the end, Caleb's victory was not measured in stock prices or corporate titles, but in something quieter and more enduring: the restoration of balance, the rewriting of a norm, the proof that systemic bias can be unmade when confronted with persistence, allies, and truth. The philosophy remains: dignity is not given. It is asserted, protected, and passed on. If you felt the weight of this story and believe that standing against prejudice matters, leave the number 1 in the comments. And to hear the next story of courage, quiet power, and justice reclaimed, subscribe to our channel.